Good afternoon. Welcome to today's CTSA Grand Rounds, which is another in our quarterly lecture series on the public-private partnership CTSA presentations. I am particularly delighted to introduce today's speaker, Mr. James Rogers III, and the title of his presentation is an overview of Mayo Clinic Ventures. Jim serves as chair of Mayo Clinic Ventures, and in this position of leadership, he's responsible for guiding, fostering, and overseeing the area of commercialization of intellectual property at the Mayo Clinic. Jim also holds an appointment in the legal department of Mayo in the business partnering group, where he's responsible for the portfolio of patents at Mayo. Jim also serves in the leadership on the full as well as the executive committee of the Medical Industry Relations Committee. Jim received his undergraduate degree in biology at the University of Iowa. He holds a JD degree with high distinction from the College of Law at the University of Iowa. Prior to joining Mayo in 2000, Jim served at the law firm of Dorsey and Whitney in the Twin Cities and also in the 3M Company. Under Jim's leadership at Mayo Clinic Ventures, there is clearly a very heightened and a renewed vision and vigor, along with remarkable achievements, exciting initiatives, and truly remarkable opportunities in the area of commercialization and intellectual property at Mayo Clinic. I am thus particularly delighted to introduce Jim as he provides his overview today on commercialization, especially the lead that MCV is taking in this area. Jim?
Thank you, Carl, for such a great introduction. I appreciate it, and I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to everyone today. As Carl mentioned, I'm the chair of Mayo Clinic Ventures, and what I hope to do today is give you a nice overview of what my group does, Mayo Clinic Ventures. From a disclosure standpoint, neither I nor the planning committee have any disclosures, so just wanted to be clear on that. And then talk a little bit about our learning objectives. So we're going to discuss Mayo Clinic Ventures, our technology evaluation process, what our innovation programs are here, a little bit about that, about how we work through startup companies and investment, which I think there's a lot of renewed interest here at Mayo, which is tremendous. Our new employee entrepreneurship program, which may interest some of you in the audience, at least I hope it does, and the Mayo Clinic Business Accelerator that we just recently launched. So what are our primary goals? Our primary goals are really try to facilitate the translation and commercialization of the intellectual property that's being developed here at Mayo out for the benefit of patients. And we also want to drive back revenue to Mayo. The revenue that's driven back goes to our education, our research, and our clinical practice. So that's really what we're all about. That's what we're trying to accomplish. There's a little bit of an eye chart, and I'm going to go into these in detail. But the bottom line that I want to kind of get across to you is we're flexible. We're not a one-size-fits-all kind of shop. What we try to do is try to come up with new and creative ideas to get our ideas out and to get a return to Mayo. And if someone's out there doing something that might be innovative and might be interesting and will work for us, we'll adopt it. I feel no reason that we have to take ownership over the process of commercialization. I think our job is just try to figure out the best way to commercialize, try to take the best ideas that are out there and incorporate it into our practice, much as Mayo does. And I think that's one of the things that makes Mayo so strong. It's not everything's invented here. It's what are the best ideas, how can we make them better, how can we bring them into our practice. Our portfolio is amazing, not MCV, but Mayo. It's just amazing the breadth and the depth of research that we have going on within our clinic. I don't know about you, but I know every day it seems to me I'm finding something new that I didn't realize, some area that we're in that I had no idea that we were working in. It's truly, truly remarkable, and it's a privilege from our perspective to be able to work in such a great environment, such a technology-rich environment. So our statistics, we receive about 2 ideas a day. It doesn't mean that every idea we receive is going to be something that's ultimately going to be commercializable. That being said, about 47% of what we see we're able to commercialize, and that's a pretty significant hit rate. So we work pretty hard to try to figure out the technologies that make the most sense and to get them out there and to commercialize them. And we're trying to work every day to increase that hit rate. We have filed an extensive amount of patents. You probably saw recently, or at least many of you may have seen, that we're number 3 in the nation or something like that for patent filings per capita. It's a significant process that we have here. We really do think it's important that if something's patentable that we go ahead and try to protect the technology. But all that being said, it doesn't have to be patentable for us to be able to commercialize it. And we are fairly successful in commercializing technologies that are not patentable or not patented. Sometimes we do it through what's called a know-how arrangement. Sometimes we do it through a tangible asset like software that we haven't filed a patent on. We've returned a lot of money to Mayo. We want to return more. It's not all about the money, but the money's significant. Obviously, without the money, there's no mission. We have to have the money to fund what we're doing. And so we push hard to make sure that we're seeing a return for what we're doing. And there's a balance that we have to strike. If we ask for too much, we can't get it commercialized. If we ask for too little, then we've missed on an opportunity that maybe could fund somebody's lab in the future. So from our perspective, we're always trying to work hard to make sure we find a reasonable valuation and we strike that balance between the valuation and getting the technology out for the benefit of patients. The other thing that we've been involved in, and a lot of people don't realize, and I think it's probably because we haven't done the best job of talking about it, is we've been involved in a lot of startup companies. We have a lot of startup activity, and as you can see from the slide, we have 85 startup companies that we've been involved in. And that's a pretty high number. We're going to dramatically increase that number as we continue to work. We're working with a lot of venture groups, we're working with a lot of entrepreneurs, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. So how do we go through our technology evaluation process? Well, it starts with the disclosure. I should back up. It doesn't always start with the disclosure because we're very proactive. And what I mean by that is we have people who are called technology development managers, and their job is to go out into the clinic and really understand what are the problems that we're trying to solve. Based on identifying the problem, we might be able to commercialize the solution. Identification of the problem is not intellectual property, but figuring out the solution is. And as an integrated practice with the breadth and the depth of research that we have here at Mayo, we have amazing opportunities to solve problems for people. Sometimes you may not even realize that you're solving a problem that could be commercializable. And that's one thing I hope you would think about coming away from this lecture, is am I working on something that maybe would have some sort of significance outside of just our practice? But once we get to the point where we think we have an idea, we make a formal disclosure. We have reporting requirements from the federal government since we take federal money. And the basis of our tracking and everything else starts with what we call a disclosure document. When I talked about 2 ideas a day, we don't get 2 disclosure documents a day. But once we think we have an idea that's worth evaluating, and or if you just want to send something to us to evaluate, we go through the disclosure process. So that's how you open the door for us. If you have questions, concerns, or you're trying to figure out how you plug in with us, just give me a call and I'm happy to talk you through it. You are our front line. Without you, we have nothing. And so we're really trying to work with trying to figure out creative ways to engage you to ensure that if you have ideas, we're seeing those ideas. What are the considerations? This is the tough stuff because when you have an idea, I know I've had ideas myself in the past, you feel very vested in those ideas. It's $1 million idea, it's $1 billion idea. You feel very strongly this is something that should be commercializable. And it's tough to hear that your baby's ugly. Unfortunately, many of my babies on the commercialization side have been ugly. Luckily, my daughters are not, but the intellectual property piece, my ideas haven't always panned out. And that's okay. I mean, what you have to understand as an inventor is you're going to kiss a lot of frogs before you find your prince. There are a lot of ideas. Many times those ideas have been done before. Even though you don't see the product that you're envisioning in your head, from a commercial standpoint, it may not be able to get from here to there. And there's a lot of reasons behind that. Is there something called prior art that's out there? From a patentability standpoint, if we can't patent it, is it something that we really need a patent in order to be successful? Because remember, people are going to say to you, how much money do you need to develop this idea? Well, ultimately, I might need $10 million to get it to a certain point where it can get commercialized. Okay, so you want me to give you $10 million. How can I stop other people from doing this? Well, I'm filing a patent on it. Well, how strong is that patent? And if the patent's not strong, it's not enforceable for some reason, if the prior art is out there that maybe calls into question the validity of your claims, I'm not going to give you $10 million. Because while you blaze the path, someone can come in right behind you and do the same product. So I can't stop them. It's not worth it to me to give you the money because I want a return on my money, and I'm not going to get it if somebody else can just jump on your product. So there's a lot of different kind of things that we have to look at, and it's difficult because, again, it's not a comment in any way, shape, or form on your science. The science could be the best, it could be tremendous, but it just may not be commercializable. On the other hand, it may be science that isn't worthy of the New England Journal, not even close, and yet it could be eminently commercializable. So there's always this give and take that we have to have. We put on our commercial glasses, you put on your academic glasses and your scientific glasses, and together we come up with something. And like I said, many times we're going to have ideas that just aren't going to get there from here. But keep trying. Don't be offended. We want to see ideas. We want to commercialize ideas. That's our job. That's how we do what we do. And so we want to see as many good ideas as possible. And we have to understand, we need a big funnel. There's a lot of things, though, that are right now that are kind of headwinds that we have to deal with. Reimbursement rates. Reimbursement rates in some places are going down, as you all know. The regulatory paths are becoming more and more challenging. The areas that are really interesting right now to a lot of people who want to invest in ideas are areas where you could take costs out of healthcare using technology. They're very interested, not so much in a medical device, obviously that's still there and everything else, but they look at a development pathway, for example, for a piece of software where you can get there in 2 to 3 years. You don't have to go through a significant FDA process, and you could be on the market. Versus a brand new medical device could be a 6 to 8 year pathway. You have a very uncertain path through the FDA, and will you get the return once you get there, even if you get approved? So that's some of the calculus that goes on right now when we're seeing some ideas. Our job, in my mind, is to make sure that we understand your idea and make sure you understand we understand your idea, and then do our best to give you the best evaluation. We may not always agree, but I see it in our mind is to try to give you the best evaluation so you understand if we're saying yes, why we're saying yes, and if we're saying no, why we're saying no. Our deal structures, I'm going to talk about these more a little bit further into the presentation, but we're very, very flexible. And that's the point I always try to get across. Right now we have a major pharma company visiting as I speak in one of our conference rooms over in the BioBusiness building. And they're meeting with some of our physicians and my team and a startup entrepreneur about an area that's very exciting. And the message we always want to get across to them is we want a deal that makes sense to both parties. We're not set, we're not wedded to one particular way of doing things. We got to have a return. I'll be very blunt about that. If you want to do a deal with me where you get everything, I get nothing, that's not going to work for Mayo. But when it's all said and done, we are going to try to do whatever we can to make a deal that works for both parties, and we're going to be flexible. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Why is all this happening? Why do tech transfer offices even exist? I mean, at some level, some people feel still strongly, look, I'm an academic, and all I should do is publish papers, and I shouldn't get involved with this commercial stuff. And what happened back in the day was the federal government said, fine, but we're spending a lot of money on research. And now, unfortunately, they're spending less money on research. We wish they'd be spending more. But during the time, they were spending a lot of money on research, and they weren't seeing, in their minds, the products being translated from the technologies that were being researched. They didn't see it. It just didn't happen. And so they struck a deal with academic medical centers and universities, and they said, we will let you take title to the inventions, but it's your obligation to go out and try to commercialize. And if you do that, you'll have a royalty sharing policy, and you'll share with your inventors. You can take title to the inventions, but again, it's your obligation to commercialize. And so from that act, most of the tech transfer offices, ours included, sprung forth. There were some that were in place beforehand, like the Wisconsin Area Research Foundation, or Alumni Research Foundation, WARF, and a couple others, like the one around Gatorade, I think, down in Florida. But by and large, there weren't technology transfer offices until this act came into being. So this is the basis from which we do our work. What's our royalty sharing policy? It's a very generous one. As an example, when I was at 3M, it's a hearty handshake and a pat on the back. There was no royalty sharing. It was part of your job, and it was the return for being able to work there the next day. You gave them all your ideas. Period, end of discussion. That's the way it worked. Well, here we're different, right? We're an academic medical center. We have a different setup. And we have a very generous royalty sharing policy. 40% goes to the inventors. 60% goes to Mayo and this is all after expenses. But even within the 60%, some of that can go to the research program of the inventor as an example. So we've really tried to set it up to be an incentive for everybody and to be generous. And I do think we're in the forefront. We're one of the more generous policies out there, and I'm very much in favor of that. So what are some of the programs that we employ? This is the big issue, the graph you'll see all the time from a commercialization standpoint. People will talk about it over and over again. When you first submit your idea, a lot of times it's a low value idea, not because the science isn't good, it's because there's a lot of risk involved, there's a lot of unknowns. So for example, if you're coming to me with a new idea for a new heart valve, we don't even know if you can get it approved. We don't know if there's patent rights that you may need. We don't know if we can effectively patent what you have, on and on and on and on. So what we have to do is we have to do something called de-risking. We have to try to figure out ways to take the risk out of the product, out of the idea, so that someone will want to invest in it. And more, just like with NIH decreasing its funding, wow, that was weird. Just like NIH decreasing its funding, venture groups are pushing out farther and farther from where they want to fund. They used to be more willing to take risks. They're becoming less willing to take risks. What does that mean for us? What it means for us is there's a big gap called the valley of death, commercialization gap. You don't want to be there if you're a technology, but you're going to end up there. And we're trying to find out ways to move you through there, to try to get you the pathway through the valley of death so that we get to a point where we have people who want to invest in the technology. So all our programs really are designed to try to get through that valley, to get to a point to be very efficient with the money we use to get the idea funded. And we have a lot of programs. I'm going to talk about each one in turn. So the Technology Development Program, I think, is one of the most effective programs that we have. And basically what we did there is we took people mostly from Mayo Labs. There's one person who's a rocket scientist who we hired from University of Iowa. We didn't have any rocket scientists that I was aware of at Mayo. We probably do, for all I know. So we got him from outside of Mayo. Everyone else we got from inside of Mayo. And we taught them about patents, and we taught them a little bit about business. And their job is to go out and work with you and try to find out, again, what you're working on. They are the tip of the spear on this proactive strategy. Their job is to try to sort out, what are you working on? What are the problems that maybe we can try to solve? What is it that industry is interested in? What is it that venture groups are interested in? And can we find something that would be a match for everybody? So they're working with all these disparate groups to try to bring people together and find a match, find something that we can fund, find something we can start a company around, or find something that we can license. I think it's a tremendous capability that Mayo has. I think we're unique in a lot of ways than other organizations. When people find out about this program, they want to try to copy it. But we've been very lucky because we've been at it for a while. So I think we're getting a lot of experience, and our guys are doing a pretty good job with it. We got 5 people in that group, and they're just tremendous, every single one of them. We do portfolio management. This slide isn't meant for you to be able to read this, but the bottom line is those green arrows shows the stage of development. And the red is something that's been licensed, and the black is something that's available. And what we try to do is we group them into, biopharma, device, healthcare IT, diagnostics, anything we think makes a logical grouping. And so we could give to a venture group, we could give to an industry partner at any one time kind of the stage of development of where our portfolio sits. And we think it's a very effective tool. We also give it then to our development people so that they know where our priorities are. Not to say that they fund our priorities, but they know where they are in case they have something that might be a match. And we give it to research, we give it to the practice, and we have an ongoing discussion to try to figure out, are there other things we should have on this list? But at least they know what we're tracking. Again, we think it's a very effective tool, particularly externally. Here's kind of the meat of our programs. From our perspective, these programs, again, fairly unique within the industry and very, very effective. We have something called the Innovation Loan Program. Loan can be kind of deceiving. It's not a loan from the perspective that you have to fill out paperwork and that if we give you the money, you have to pay it back regardless of what happens. What it is a loan to the technology to try to bring the technology through that valley. So typically what it would involve is prototyping, a proof of concept study, maybe a first in human type study. If the technology is successful down the road and there's a commercialization event, then the money gets paid back. If the technology fails, the money doesn't get paid back. And it's really designed to try to either get to yes or no very quickly. And again, it's been a very effective program. We've used this program to partner with entrepreneurs and to partner with venture groups. They like the fact that we have some money to bring to the table. It's not a lot. In the grand scheme of things, it's really not a lot of money. Our typical our loan is $50,000. And yet we can go a long way with $50,000. We can go up to $200,000 in that program. A separate program that we don't run but that we have input on is something called the President's Discovery and Translation Fund. And again, very innovative thinking in my mind, a very effective program. That program is a peer-reviewed program where 22 or so people throughout the institution review it for scientific merit. They have a call for proposals, and then we come in just from the commercialization side, and we give our analysis. And based on all that, they make decisions to determine who they were going to grant some money to during these funding rounds, and there's typically 2 a year. And again, very commercially focused, trying to get to a point where we can get a return off of the money that we're spending. 2 tremendous programs. The third program that we have, I don't know if I have it in the slide, but if I don't, I'll talk about it, is our, yeah, I do have it a little bit later, so I'll talk about it a little bit later. Then we have the Entrepreneur in Residence program. And again, another way I think to be effective in engaging industry. I can sit here all day and say to industry, here's what I think Mayo thinks you should do. But that's just a one-way conversation. It's not going to be very effective. So what we do is we look for people who have done it before, who have started companies and successfully exited. A successful exit means that they've either sold the company or the company went public. And we look to them to work with us. And we may put a team. We may take the 5 guys right in front here and we say to them, this is your team. Here's a problem we're trying to solve. Let's go and see if we can do something. They come up with some filings from an intellectual property standpoint, and then he goes off, or her, whoever that entrepreneur is, and tries to raise money around that concept. We don't pay them. The only way that they get upside is by having equity in that company. So they're not getting any money from Mayo. They're all on their own. They're all in on trying to make it successful. And if they're successful, they will see a nice return in terms of equity. And if they fail, they just basically work for nothing for a significant amount of time. So it's kind of a high risk for them, and they're going to want to look at programs they think they can be successful in. But it's a great opportunity for us to have people who have done it before, who are very, very skilled, and who want to work with Mayo. And so that's a program we have working, and we've had some successful results there. I'm going to show a few at the end here. Corporate CoFund program just means that we talk to any company who comes in and say to them, are you interested in funding research with us? Are you interested in any area where you could put people on our campus with our researchers? We have people from Boston Scientific who sit in my offices and work with our cardiology department. And they're working under a collaboration agreement. We work with people, as many people as we can talk to say, are you interested? Because it's Mayo, we have these unique opportunities, we have these unique skill sets. We would love to work with you from a research standpoint. That's a corporate co-fund program. Now, the corporates are going to want to have a focus ultimately on commercialization, but that's okay. They also understand that we need the basic research, so there's always a balance there. And we do the new company formation that I've talked about. We will start companies around ideas. Sometimes we'll incubate them a little bit internally, but by and large we'll have them externally. And normally what we want to do is we want to put a very good management team in place to run with that technology, and it seems to work pretty well for us. Here's some of the companies we've recently started. You may have heard about Cardio3. Cardio3 was only the second IPO in Belgium in the last 3 years. I think in the medical space or just in general. And when it came out, when it went public, someone took a shot at the science, said the science was all suspect science. And then it turned out the guy that was taking the shot didn't read any of the papers that were peer-reviewed, and was basically dead wrong. So you get a little bit of that going on, but the interesting part about all this is Cardio3, you know, that's in the regenerative medicine space. It's a really interesting technology, and it's a great Mayo story. That company was probably dead 3 or 4 times, but it's alive. We have a nice position in it, and now it's a public company. And we think ultimately that technology could really pan out. It could be a really successful thing. So those are the examples of the things that are going on. If you look at all these across the board, these all have Mayo technologies in them. And we hope at the end of the day that, you know, they translate to patients. And if they do, that we'll see a nice return in exchange for that. The CoInvestment Fund was the third program I wanted to talk to you about. That's a $100 million fund. That fund is money that comes from Treasury Services. And they look at the money and they say, okay, we invest our money for our long-term fund in all these different places with money managers from all over the world. We'll take a bit of that and we're going to put it with a fund. And we want that fund to basically advance Mayo technologies. So what has to happen in this fund is you have to have a Mayo technology, and you have to have a blue chip venture capitalist or a private equity firm invest, be the lead investor. So what it means is the market's really speaking and saying, yep, regardless of how much I like the technology, now we have someone who does this all day long, every day. This is all they do. They're saying, I really like this technology. If they invest, we can invest alongside them. And it gives us a very powerful tool, because now you can see from the seed funding standpoint, we can start from an ILP award, we could potentially go to a DTF award, and then if we're successful, we can go to this fund. And it allows Mayo to keep a nice equity position. So I'm using some terms, and I hope I don't want to lose you on things, but the equity basically means if I want to start a company, I could have, let's say, 100 shares in equity, and each share might be worth, you know, $1. So I got $100. As I'm going along, I'm going to have to be giving equity to people for them to do things for me because I don't have a lot of cash, so I'm giving them equity. And they take the equity hoping that my company becomes more successful. And then I may issue more shares, and I may get what's called diluted, but I'm hoping that even though I'm diluted, I have less shares, my shares are worth more now. And so ultimately, I could be worth more and more. The hard part for an academic medical center or a university always is if you do some sort of initial investment, you get diluted big time. By the time it's done, you have such a small percentage that you might not be able to really receive a return. These funds allow us to maintain equity positions as we go along. So it really allows us to jump up in value. And then if a company has a successful exit, we should see a very nice return for that. And that's you know, again, a great tool for us. And this is one of the tools that we appreciate, the partnership with Treasury Services and the trust they put in working with us. But we think it's been a very successful fund because, again, the market speaks. It's not what I like so much, it's what the market says they like in addition to what I like. Here's some of the companies that we have that have been funded in that fund. You'll see some of them are the same ones that you saw on that other slide, but not all of them. And again, some very interesting companies here. SureRx is one that we did on psychotropic medications, where basically we're genotyping you to try to determine whether or not you're going to metabolize the drug correctly. And it used to be they just basically give you the drug and start titrating you up to see if you have, you know, if it's effective or not. And you can imagine that doesn't work too well, at least in my mind. Instead, they genotype you and they try to tell you, okay, here's ones that maybe you want to consider, here's ones that you got to watch, and here's one you shouldn't do at all. It's a great personalized medicine story. It's not, I mean, it is rocket science at some level, but it really isn't rocket science at another level. And it's an example of, there's a lot of ideas we have out there that could be very commercializable and very, very beneficial for patients. Because if you look at what was happening before to what's happening now, it's a great story. And you'll see, I think on the internet homepage, there was a story related, a P450 story, about an individual who got the diagnostic test and realized the medications were working against him. And basically his parents said, I got my kid back. So that's, you know, that's the kind of stuff we do. We love doing that. Here's some of our co-investors. So Bay City Capital, Frazier, Bard, these are all, Baird, I'm sorry. These are all, you know, again, blue chip groups. These are highly vetted groups that we put our money with from our endowment standpoint, people we trust. And those are the type of people we're going to want to work with. So we feel fairly comfortable with the process that we have in place. It's working pretty well. Here's some companies that I wanted to talk about in terms of, you know, some successes. One of the examples is just trying to figure out a way to access the heart and deal with mitral valve regurgitation. And standard of care right now is crack the heart. This is a way to do it without cracking the heart. It's a neat little technology. It's one that's been funded. It's one that we have an entrepreneur in residence. Still got a ways to go. It's not quite there yet, but we're very hopeful about it. And it's a great example of an idea that really changed or could change people's lives very significantly for the better. I would much rather have this approach than having someone crack my chest open. SureRx is the one I just talked about. You can see how the reports work on the right. Again, a very interesting approach. This is a company that potentially could go public in the not too distant future. And that's pretty significant because most companies aren't going public these days. Physician software systems is another great example, another great Mayo technology. I love this example. This is an example where the standard of care used to be one dose for everybody. If you're on dialysis, you get these drugs. These drugs are very powerful. And the problem with them is trying to stay in the therapeutic range. So people are constantly cycling in and out of the therapeutic range. And when you did that, you almost always ended up in the hospital. So our guys came up with a really simple algorithm to just basically keep you in the therapeutic range. And now people don't do the one size fits all. They do a dosage that's specific to you. And we went from, you know, losing money on these types of patients to now it's a profit center at some level, and we're able to push that out now to the market, and that company's been funded. Another company that, again, has an entrepreneur in residence that's working with us. So these are the types of stories that are great stories for Mayo, regardless of whether we make $1 on them. But we do think, ultimately, we're going to have a nice return for them. And those are the sorts of stories we'd like to be able to have with you. We'd like to have you as the authors of those stories. So we're looking to you to say, do you have ideas along these lines? Because if you do, we want to talk to you. And realize, I may tell you 10 times, nope, nope, nope. But that 11th time, hopefully we'll find one that works. And I would hope that you'd be fired up about it and you'd be passionate about it, because we're passionate about it. This is stuff we love to do. The Employee Entrepreneurship Program is a brand new program. I just had a grand rounds on it 2 days ago, I think, in this very auditorium. And so if any of you were there, I apologize up front, but I'm just going to do a very short, brief part about it. And basically what it is in the past, if you were a consultant, you could not own a medically related company. It was not permitted here at Mayo. It's now permitted. And the intent behind it is to say, look, there might be things that we really can't commercialize, or it might be something that you think you have a path forward on commercializing. And maybe we can't do it, but maybe you got a path, maybe you want to try it. This is another tool that's available for you to do that. So basically what it means is we still own the intellectual property because Mayo owns your intellectual property when you work here. But you have the opportunity to start a company and we'll license the intellectual property into that company. It starts with that disclosure form I talked about. So you have to have a disclosure on file. And if you do that, then we can have the discussion about how it works. But basically you sign an option agreement, and then after you sign the option agreement, we will put a license in place. But basically what happens is you come back during that option period and you try to figure out what your business plan is and how much money you would need to raise in order to be successful. And based on that, we evaluate it. And then if it's all in place, we go forward. It's very simple, very straightforward. It's meant to be very simple and very straightforward. And so from my perspective, I'd like to encourage it. I'd like to encourage you to think about it. It's not for everybody. It's a lot of work to start your own company, and it can be a little frustrating, a little challenging, particularly raising the money in this environment. But all that being said, we really want to encourage more people to try it. So we're open to having that discussion with you. The Mayo Clinic Business Accelerator is a new facility that we put in place to try to increase the level, if you will, of entrepreneurship and innovation. What we're trying to find is a place where you can meet, where if, for example, my lecture today went way over your head, you may still have some questions. And you might say, you know, I didn't understand that, dude, but I really would like to talk to someone that understands this process, and I'm interested in it. We're trying to put a meeting place together for that. And we have 4 venture groups in there right now, which is really unique in an accelerator setting. What is an accelerator? Accelerator really is some place where you're trying to put a creative, entrepreneurial, innovative atmosphere together and trying to bring companies through quickly to get them to market quickly. And we have been staging that type of process here at Mayo. We don't own the accelerator. It's a partnership with the city and with READY, Rochester Area Economic Development, Inc. But basically, we have 16 tenants now. We have a lot of startup companies in that accelerator already. And we're starting to recruit classes from outside of Rochester, meaning teams that have put together what they think are creative ideas. They're actually going to come to Rochester, work in the accelerator. The hope being that at the end of that time, they decide they want to stay in Rochester and put down roots. What's our ultimate goal? Our ultimate goal is to have a lot more creativity here in Rochester and a lot more diverse economy. We want to see as much as possible people starting ideas, starting companies, having ideas, pushing to really try to say, can I start a company? How do I do it? What do I need in order to do it? We're trying to put that infrastructure in place. That's why we have the venture groups. But we're also going to have different people coming through that are going to lecture about, hey, I'm an entrepreneur, I did it, this is how it works. These are the pros of it, these are the cons. It may not be for you, it may be for you. Here's what you're going to think about if you want to go into this type of arrangement. You want to keep your eyes wide open while you're doing it. So the accelerator has got about 2,000 square feet. It's right in Bio Business on the second floor in the Skyway. There's lockable offices, there's benches that you have that you can use, and there's a big conference room that's available to you. It's kind of a turnkey operation. If you take the lease from Ready, you're right up and running right away. And the whole point behind it is that it's easy in, easy out. So you may want to have an office for 2 months or 3 months. You have that ability. You may want to stay there for longer. You'll have that ability as well. That we're really trying, again, to encourage people who are interested in being entrepreneurs or being a little more innovative to come see us and see if we can try to plug you into the infrastructure that we're trying to build. And then again, our ultimate roadmap is going to be, the next step is we're going to try to recruit people from outside of Rochester, bring them in, and hopefully have them stay here and put down roots and start some companies. And that's what it looks like from a grand plan standpoint. I went through that very quickly. My understanding is what they'll do is they'll pause, and everyone who wants to leave can leave, and then they'll have some microphones for anyone who wants to ask questions. I believe is how it works. So I will pause right here for anyone who wants to exit, but I otherwise really appreciate your time and your attention. Thank you.